Hey everybody, today I'm talking about Akrotiri, which is a two-player board game designed by Jay Cormier and Seng-Foon Lim. This one takes around 45 minutes to play. Now the key mechanisms of this game are tile placement, pickup and delivery, and I suppose you can call it contract fulfillment. So I've advanced the game a little bit here just to show you how the map develops, where you've got this main tile here in the centre, which is kind of your hub of the game. And as the game develops, you're placing more and more tiles onto the board and creating these little islands and placing these little cubes as you do so. So you've got a big stack of tiles to play with. You're going to have some kind of communal resources here, such as these contracts, which we'll talk about shortly. You've got the money, you've got these endgame objective tiles, and you have the market here. So this is going to show the current value of all the different resources. So you've got 4 different resources here, each relating to one of the different terrain types. So you can see here we've got the trees, the mountains, the volcanoes, and the kind of sea symbol. And as these get placed onto the board, you're going to be making those more valuable in order to collect them and deliver them back to the centre. Each player is also going to have their personal player board, which looks like this, which is mainly just a breakdown of your potential actions in the game. And you're also going to have 6 temples placed on each of these spots. And this is going to be one of the endgame triggers. So as soon as somebody's placed their 6th temple, you're going to keep playing until there's equal turns, and then the endgame will be triggered, where you'll calculate points based on the gold cards that you collect at the beginning of the game and potentially throughout the game. Like this one here says, I'm going to get 2 points for each of my temples on an island with one of these tree symbols on. But the main way you're going to get victory points is through these contract cards, which look like this. So how these work is that a particular island, represented by the symbol in the middle, needs to be in a position in relation to the other symbols around it. So you can see this one needs to have a mountain to the west of it, it needs to have a tree to the north of it, and it needs to have a volcano to the east of it. So how that works in actuality is, let's say I move my boat to this island here. You can see that I have a tree to the north of it. I have a volcano to the east of it here. Doesn't matter if it's north or south, as long as it's somewhere to the east. And you've got a mountain to the west of it, all the way over here. So I can see I've successfully completed this criteria. Therefore, I can pay this fee, i.e. 3 coins, to put my leftmost temple on my player board onto that particular island. Another island can never be shared with anybody else, and it has to go in a particular quarter of this tile, just to show where in relation, precisely it is to those other symbols. And as you can see, the more you unlock these temples, the more bonuses you get. So now I would have started with a basic value of 3 actions per turn. Now I've unlocked 4. So you do kind of snowball as the game goes on and unlock more and more actions. And potentially, as you place more islands down or temples down, you can get more endgame bonus cards, get more actions, more endgame bonus cards, even going up to 6 actions before it is the end game trigger. So let's talk about how the game works and how the actions are resolved. So the first thing you'll do every single turn is you'll place a new tile onto the board. And when you do that, you can place it kind of flush with any other tile there. And then you're going to find the resource type. So you've got the mountain one here. You're going to have a look on the supply and demand board, and you're going to pick up that cube and put it on the matching spot like so. And then you can pick another cube and put it on any other island. So let's just say I picked up this one here and put it on, let's say I put it on this island with no thought or reasoning behind this. So that's a mandatory action. You have to do that every single time, but of course you are trying to think of your objective cards by manipulating these symbols into certain points on the map so that you can fulfill those contract cards. Now the other actions you can take are divided as you see fit by using as many action points as you have. So you can see here I've got 4 action points, and I can divide them up between these other actions. So the first thing is moving, of course. And to move, as long as your boat is empty, as a single action you can move up to twice. So let's just say I move my blue boat all the way to, let's say, this port here. So you can keep moving until you get to a port. And another action I can use to actually teleport from port to port. So that'll be a single action because I've moved twice. One going to this port here and one going from port to port, like so. Now, if you ever had any cargo on your boat, then that movement is actually halved and you have to spend a whole action point just to move once. Additionally, if someone is sat on a certain port and you have to cross their path, then you have to spend an additional movement point. So that is how movement works. A second action is loading your boat. where you can place up to 3 resources onto your boat as an action. So let's just say I took these 2 red cubes and I put them onto my boat like so. Another action is excavate, as we discussed earlier when playing those temples onto the particular islands, as long as you have the criteria completed on that card and have the funds to do so. Another one is to buy maps, as long as you are in the main capital here in Thera. You can go there and you can spend either 1 coin for 1 map, 3 coins for 2 maps, or 7 coins for 3 maps. And you can take that as you see fit amongst the 3 different categories. So you have 3 different categories of cards here: the easy ones, the medium ones, and the difficult ones. And of course the difficult ones need a lot harder criteria to fulfill, and they're much more expensive, but they give you a hell of a lot more points if you manage to complete them. So that's how the buying map works. And finally, you have the Oracle action, which means you can basically look through the deck there to find the first tile in the stack of a particular symbol that you want. So you do have a certain amount or a certain degree of mitigation of finding a particular symbol, again with the aim of completing these contract cards. Now there are a few bonus actions you can take. 3 actions here. Number 1 is to sell resources, and another one is to unload resources. So let's just say you had a boat that and you were carrying a resource that you didn't want. You can literally do a free action just to drop off a cube. But another one, which is a big part of the game, let's just say I was back here at the capital, as a free action I can choose to sell a number of cubes back to the market. So I've got 2 red cubes here. I'll put them back on the supply and demand board here and take the amount of cubes that I've just replenished. So you can see here I'll get another 5 income for doing that. So kind of picking up the cubes that are rarer or on the board more often is going to be a lot more profitable than picking up ones that are higher up on this track. And that is essentially how the game plays. You're going to keep taking those actions until you've got all 6 temples down, or the other person has, and then points are going to get calculated based on the cards you completed, the end game bonus cards, and you get 1 point for every 10 coins you have remaining. Okay, so let's go into some thoughts on Akrotiri. So mechanically the game is very simple. You just place a tile onto the board, obviously bearing in mind that you want to be aiming towards these objective cards. And the pick up and deliver factor of the game is quite strong. You know, I'm in the camp of really enjoying pick up and deliver games. It seems to be somewhat of a polarizing mechanism in the board game space. You know, you seem to love it or not be so keen. But for me, I am a fan of it. And I think this one does the pick up and deliver thing very well, because it's not the sole focus of the game. It really is the economy of the game, because you need money to do everything, and the money is based on the pick up and deliver mechanism, which all ties back to the supply and demand of the particular cube. So if you see there's an island here just sitting there with a very valuable cube on, like this mountain one here, you know, the mountain cubes are going to be very expensive, then you're going to be wanting to get in there quite quickly to load up your boat. But bearing in mind you're going to be spending your actions to do so, and of course actions are going to be your efficiency throughout the game. You'll be making sure you're not wasting any actions, because essentially it is a race, and if you get caught off guard by somebody placing their 6th temple before you do, then again that can potentially cost you quite dearly. But yeah, I do love this factor of, you know, do I want to race and get to this perfect island, because you know these islands do get gobbled up quite quickly, and you cannot share islands that already have a temple on them, so you've got to be quite careful that way. So yeah, you need to make sure, like, can I get to that island and get my temple on it, or am I going to go and gobble up these cubes, get them back to base and cash in on them in order to get my funds up, because you need the funds in order to complete the cards in the first place, and you need the funds in order to draw more cards to give you more flexibility, so you're not such a slave to the cards you're drawing. So there is a good meshing there of the 2 mechanisms, the money and the actual objective cards, which I think works really well. I also do like the consideration of the end game goal cards, because this is quite a strong part of the game. They aren't just a few throwaway points which could swing it. These are very quite pivotal to who's going to win the game if you choose to focus on them accordingly. And these are quite interesting. You know, you've got the typical ones. You know, have a temple on islands with the mountains on or the volcanoes on, but you have got some quite decent ones as well, such as this one here. That says you're going to get a point for each tile that your largest island with a temple on covers. So, you know, if you have a particularly massive island and you get a temple on it, you can get a lot of points that way. You know, if I've got a temple on this island, it's going to cover 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tiles, which is really strong. So these are all things to consider, and even ones like this, you might get points based on islands where you don't have any symbols on, or this one you have 3 different symbols on, and you get quite a lot of points that way. So yeah, these are not just a throwaway thing that could happen at the end of the game if you, just by happenstance, if you focus on them, that can be the difference maker, which I do like. I also really enjoy the way the map actually develops, because a lot of these tile placement games, they seem to kind of follow the same pattern and the same blueprint by, connecting fields to fields, all this kind of thing. But this one, you're really focusing on the routes themselves, because the routes do actually create some really interesting pathways. And you can actually create these kind of isolated islands where you cannot get through unless you pass through other islands. Like, for example, I don't believe I can get to this island unless I cut through this island, which is quite cool, and it can become that movement puzzle and can end up costing quite a few actions. But, is that going to be worth it, because there is some valuable resources on there? The game also has a nice momentum to it, because when you're placing more and more temples down, you are unlocking more and more actions. So you are becoming significantly more powerful towards the end of the game than you are at the beginning of the game. But that kind of balances out because the map is getting bigger. So you might need to venture out further to get to new, fresh islands that haven't been conquered yet. So it does do a good job of, keeping the game flowing at a fast pace rather than just plodding along. Now, despite the rule set being very smooth and easily digestible in terms of the actions you're taking, I do have some problems with the swinginess of luck in this game, because passively, as the game develops, you are just simply going to be placing more and more logos on the board. And because you are drawing cards randomly from these different stacks here, sometimes the criteria will automatically be fulfilled just as soon as you draw it. There might be that perfect island there that has all those symbols to the north, all those to the west, all to the south, and all to the east. And when that happens, it's a bit disgruntling if you are on the reverse side of it. And even if you are on the winning side of it, it feels like you haven't really worked towards that. You haven't earned those points. It just so happens to be there. Yeah, I suppose you can consider that that you have to pay to get those cards completed in the first place, which probably means you have to, do some pickup and delivery. But it does work out like that sometimes. You're just going to get a very lucky card draw, and your opponent might not. So, and when it's such a tight game in terms of getting your things down, that can swing the game massively. I also didn't find the decision making in this game particularly taxing or meaningful. For example, whenever a particular tile comes out and the resource on that tile is very low on the market here, you're probably going to just go and grab it, because money is the key to everything in this game, and it's a bit of a no-brainer decision. So I didn't find that terribly interesting. Additionally, getting these cards fulfilled isn't that interesting either, because if you're going to draw some water tiles and you've got this card, you're probably going to put it as high up as possible, the mountains as eastwards as possible, and the trees as southwards as possible, and it'll just work out by default that you'll eventually get those fulfilled, because all the tiles are laid out in such a manner that islands just form by default. And so the game kind of plays itself at times, and there isn't really that logistics puzzle, which I tend to like with pick up and deliver style games. Now, despite some of my criticisms there, this game does play in a very succinct amount of time. It does only take around 45 minutes to play, which feels right for the game. It doesn't outstay its welcome, and it does move along at quite a rapid pace. The player turns are quite quick, simply just buzzing around the map or picking up cubes and things. They're not going to be long, agonising decisions. There is some passive player interaction here, and particularly based off the market. If you know that your opponent's going to collect some of these cubes, then you might want to go there quicker to get them more money, because of course the more this board fills up, the cheaper those resources are going to get when you do sell them. Additionally, there is some kind of scarceness and a attention to grab the islands to get your cards fulfilled, because even though an island might fulfill all your objectives, it doesn't mean that island won't fulfill your opponent's objectives as well. So that does happen in each game. You really want an island and someone goes and grabs it from you, meaning that your plans are being thrown away and you have to start again and think of a new island to go to, and maybe even place more tiles to get those icons in the right place. So there is that passive tension there, but other than that, it's not terribly interactive. Aesthetically and from a production standpoint, I think this game does a fantastic job. I love the way the board develops. The islands look fantastic, and I just love the way that the game looks as it plays. It just really come alive. I love the way the routes develop. It's really good. Additionally, the actual player pieces themselves, like the boats and the little cubes and things, are wonderful. I love the way that these are just simplified. They're nice and simplistic, and the cubes fit in these boats perfectly. There are a lot of games that use this kind of mechanism, all this use of components where you put cubes in the boats physically, and they're always really fiddly. They always try to overdo it. This one takes a nice simple approach and actually does what it sets out to do. The temples and things are really nice. These are like a ceramic kind of material. The little resource board is just a thin cardboard sheet, but it's fine for the job. And these are just all your standard Euro cubes. The money's a little bit small and fiddly, but you don't need tons of it, and you're always kind of giving and taking that money, so it's no big deal there. And the card stock and quality is absolutely fine. Iconography is good. I say there's a little bit of ambiguity amongst some of the objective cards and what they do and how they work. But there is a really good kind of legend on the back of the rules book. So yeah, from a production standpoint, I've got no issues at all. And I think it's very well done for such a small little box. Okay, so final thoughts on Akrotiri. Straight up, I think this game is good. It does what it's supposed to do. It's got a good blend of mechanisms here. The pick and deliver works well, and particularly when it's synergized with the supply and demand of the different resources, and money being a key and pivotal part of the game. I think the contracts, or the way the contracts work, is a little bit vague, and it just kind of makes itself complete, just passively, which makes the decisions feel a little bit lackluster and a little bit limp. I would say that I think a lot of this is down to me having played so many games and having quite firm favourites of this genre. I mentioned Oracle of Delphi before. I always think whenever I play a pick up and deliver game, I think, well, I'd rather be playing Oracle of Delphi. And this is another example of that. I think that game just is a bit more vibrant, it's a bit more alive. But I have to kind of give the caveat that this game does take half the amount of time of a game like that. So that needs to be given some kind of credibility. But I like the way everything works, but for some strange reason, I don't get an enormous amount of fun from playing it, which is quite strange to say because, again, on paper, this has all the ingredients to a game I'd like. Supply and demand I love, pick up and deliver I love, contract fulfillment I generally enjoy, the aesthetic and production of the game is fantastic. But yeah, it's just missing that extra layer of that logistics puzzle, and it's missing that kind of magic ingredient of what creates fun, for me at least. But I think it's a really good effort. It's a bit of a near miss for me. It's just missing that extra element. But again, if I played this one years ago, I might be speaking in a very different language than I am now, because with more experience of playing games, then more and more games just seem to feel a bit more mediocre. Whereas this one I think is above average. I certainly do think it's above average. Quite a bit above average, to be honest. But because I am comparing it to some favourites, which do a lot of the same things, then just by default it becomes something that isn't quite collection worthy. And that is my kind of thoughts on Akrotiri